shortly. Now, have you heard of smart motorways? The very name smart motorway should alarm you, because normally when you give something a description like that, it often turns out it's not so smart. We have about 500 miles of them in this country already. What this really means, in a nutshell, is that there is no hard shoulder. And the hard shoulder is given over to be another lane. And it therefore depends on electronic signs to signal the emergency closure of one of those lanes, or sometimes reduce speed limits, but emergency lane closure, which can mean that there are people parked up there for a number of reasons. And the argument is that if the electronics work and the technology works, they will not be at risk. But the evidence is far from convincing. They are still going ahead. The government minister this week from the Lords intimated that whilst they've introduced some reforms and plans to make them safer, they say, the government remain committed to them. And we're really asking if that's such a good idea. And I felt it compelling to look at the opposition to this. And I'm very pleased to welcome Claire Mercer, who's sadly the widow of Jason Mercer, who was killed on a smart motorway. Claire, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
Claire, obviously terrible personal circumstances for you, but you have been since then on a mission to essentially convince the public and the government that smart motorways are frankly dangerous and they should be effectively switched off. Can you perhaps tell me in a nutshell why you think the government are still pressing ahead with them despite your campaign and some of the evidence that you presented to them?
Money. It's as simple as money. Because the conversion of these motorways into smart motorways equals £1 billion contracts, literally £1 billion, many of them, because it's billions of pounds for each area. So you've got the big civil engineering companies all clamouring, quoting for these, bidding for these jobs. And it generates a lot of work and business and money changing hands. And then you look at who sponsors these different MPs and, positions when it's coming around to re-election, and it's the same large civil companies, engineering companies. So it's just money. It's just moving the money around.
Do you think they're effectively committed to them? They spent so much money that they're going to continue with them. I think I'm right in saying it's about 500 miles of them already. Yep. Do you have any idea of what the current plans are for expansion of these motorways?
Well, at the beginning of this year, they said they wanted to triple the amount of smart motorways by the end of this year.
Wow.
I don't know whether they're still on target for that, but that was just this year. So we'd have 1,500 miles by the end of this year. And obviously, they're just going to keep doing it. They're just going to keep going and going with it. And if anything, they accelerated the rollout. The one that Jason was killed on shouldn't have even been opened when he was killed there. They seem to really push these things through. And I do think a big part of that was get these things done and out before the public becomes aware, because nobody knew what they were.
And in fact, we've been talking about them for years, but it's not really been in the public domain, has it?
No. So you can't object to what you don't know about, can you?
No.
It's only when one person got killed here and a couple of people got killed there and then a couple of people got killed there, and then eventually, slowly, we kind of gravitated to each other and realised that there was a much problem here. And just nobody, we've actually had smart motorways since 1997, but obviously on a much smaller scale, and there were tests and trials, and they were, the display model, so always far superior to what you actually get. And Claire, since then they've just been cheapening them.
Can you tell me if I've got this right, and snap me down, don't hesitate to do it, but basically, if I understand it, and if I understand also what happened with your husband, the technology failed so that no drivers were aware that there were two broken down vehicles sitting in the lane of a motorway. Is that correct?
It is, but also if you read the brochures about smart motorways, it'll tell you there's something called SVD fitted, which is stationary vehicle detection. But if you actually look into it, they only fit SVD on 15%. They're currently only on 15% of smart motorways, and they're all down south.
And what does this technology do? Sorry,
that can tell when just one or two vehicles stop.
Okay.
So that would have picked Jason and Alexandria up automatically, but because it's not even fitted, it was down to the camera operators. And now, in their inquest and the trial resulting from Jason and Alexandria's death, it had to be admitted, because they were in a courtroom, by Highways England, that they don't even monitor these cameras.
So the question is, why are they open?
Exactly. So they don't have the promised technology fitted. The technology that is there isn't used. The camera operators, the control room operators, are doing so many different tasks. They don't have time to monitor the cameras. The words actually used in the trial were, by Highways England, they are rarely looked at, the cameras, because the operators doing so many other tasks. So we're all of this mindset that there's constant, and even in this parliamentary session this week, Nick Harris, acting chair, said we've got 100% CCTV coverage. But luckily, the chair of the committee said, yes, but you don't monitor it. And he said, no, but we've still got it. So he's boasting about safety features that's not even used. So the SVD wasn't there to pick them up. The cameras weren't monitored to see them. So the gantry lights weren't changed, and they've had a minor crash. They were at a sign that said no hard shoulder for 4 miles, so they thought there was nowhere to stop for 4 miles. And so they pulled over where they could, but they couldn't get right out of a running lane because of crash barrier, and they couldn't get over the barrier because there was a 30-foot drop. They just bulldoze these things out. They don't even look at the surrounding landscape. They don't say to themselves, well, we can't have it there because they can't get over the barrier there. An 8-year-old boy was killed on a viaduct smart motorway. What are you meant to do on a viaduct smart motorway? Leap over the side?
Well, precisely. Now, I'm going to ask you this question, and forgive me for doing so, but would you think, even what's happened to you and to your loss, if the technology was there and it actually worked, do you think that they would still be a safe and sensible option?
Controlled smart motorways are the option, because that has a hard shoulder and the technology. So we have what we always had, and we have some technology that may or may not help on top of it. But other than that, we have to have a hard shoulder. There is so many different reasons why you might need to stop on a smart motorway. People think that because we're all new cars these days that they're less likely to stop, but they're not cogs and gears anymore. They're computers. And when the computer glitches, the car just stops. One of the big brands, is it Jaguar or Porsche or someone, has just had to recall all their models because they're just stopping. And that's a premium brand.
Premium brand. Claire, what's next for your campaign?
We're just going to keep pushing on. We've got a judicial review going on already. So Highways England are trying to ignore us. We need a response from them. And
what are you trying to do with that judicial review?
That is to get smart motorways banned, basically. You have to bring a judicial review against a government decision because they're a government department. So we have to take a judicial review. Highways England are slow timing us, unfortunately. But we're pushing on with that, and we're looking at bringing other judicial reviews because it's discrimination. If you and I are in danger, then how about somebody with mobility issues? How about somebody that's got disability problems or over a certain age? Nargis Begum was trying to get over the barrier when she was killed. She was 65. My mum's 73. She wouldn't be able to get over a barrier if she needed to.
No.
So can all these people not use motorways then?
Well, quite. Claire, we're asking our listeners to let us know what they think of your campaign. Just give us details of your website before we have to part company.
Okay. Well, we've got Twitter, Facebook, even Instagram, although I don't know how to work it, and a website, all called Smart Motorways Kill.
Smart Motorways Kill. Claire, thank you very much for joining us. Good luck with your case. And when your judicial review is brought to a conclusion, we do hope you'll come back on and tell us how you're going and how you got on and what may be next. That was Claire Mercer, who's, as you hear, campaigning against the use of smart motorways, where the evidence on the paper says it looks like that there's a good case for having them, but in practice the technology is not delivering and lives are at risk. Join the conversation 0344 499 1000.